the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. The best and brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes. We'll talk to them all, and we'll get the good, the bad, and the ugly on how they made it. Decoding the secrets of success. And now your host, Terry Barr.
So welcome to season 2. This is episode 3 of season 2 of Grind to Growth to Greatness. I have a terrific guest today. I've known this guest for, we just figured that out, somewhere about 40 years, maybe 45 years. It's been a long time, but a lot has happened since we knew each other, and we're excited to bring her to you. She's got quite a story, and her family is included in this story, and she's done some tremendous things in her community. So I wanted to bring her on. Her name is Nancy Elbert. She's from Carmel, Indiana, and she is the founder of the Chris Center, and we'll get into what the Chris Center is. But I wanted to bring her on and say, Nancy, welcome to the show. Thanks for sharing this yet again. I know this is anytime we have a nonprofit on our show, there's a backstory to it. And if you know anything about our podcast, it's all about the underlying journey. And so we like to hit on that. We like to talk about the journey, what prompts people to do great things and how they got there. And I would put this in the category of great things for sure. It's very new, pretty new, but boy, they have come a long way and are doing some tremendous things. So Nancy Elbert, Carmel, Indiana, welcome to our show.
Thanks, Terry.
Great. So I want to hear a little bit about your family. I want to hear where you grew up. Mm-hmm. I understand it's a fairly small town, but tell us a little about who you are, how you grew up, where you grew up in your family.
Well, Terry, you and I go back that far to Kentland, Indiana, and a tiny little community north of Lafayette, farming community. My dad was the high school principal there. And a wonderful childhood. I mean, I think all of us can kind of say that. We were outside the Kent Ditch was our playground. We played sports and we tag, and I'll shout out to Lincoln Street where I grew up, the Kearns, the Pollys, the Hutchisons, the Marvins. I mean, just a great street to grow up on, and all the people that influenced me in my life from growing up. But just it's a great place to come from.
So mom and dad,
and that plays into the story. We'll talk about that.
So dad's the principal of the school. He's kind of a legend around those parts. And super nice guy, gentle giant kind of man, loves Purdue basketball. So I understand he had a great time during this season. They didn't quite get it, but they were in the finals. So dad was loving that.
Yeah. He's a big sports fan. And again, this is a lot of the influence on why I did what I did, because he felt that everybody should play a sport. Now, in later years, because we all played a sport growing up, but his grandchildren came into the picture, 16 of them, and then he started thinking, theater's pretty cool, and the chess club and all these other things, and so. But he believed that every teenager should be involved in something, in their lives, and just an optimistic person.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've talked about this a couple times. Both my boys were in sports growing up. Of course, I was a baseball player and a wrestler and a golfer and some of these other things in high school. But my boys grew up playing that, and it was kind of a no-brainer for me. My kids should play sports. It's great for this, that, and the other thing. And I look back then, I go, maybe they should have been in the play. Maybe they should have done some other things too. But yeah, so I certainly understand your dad's point of view.
Yeah. And so, again, it doesn't matter as long as they're involved with something. And I think that's key and part of how I came to what I was doing, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. So mom is with us still, and dad's with us still. They're still living in Kentland.
Dad does have, no, they are actually in West Lafayette. Okay. He does have dementia, but he's always been an optimist. So he's a happy person with dementia. And my mom, again, shout out to her at 91 and 93. She's doing a wonderful job of lovingly taking care of him.
That's terrific.
That's where we are.
That's terrific. So You have 3 kids, college-age kids. I think you told me Garrett, Kellen, and Brooke, a boy and 2 girls. And
Brooke
tell me a little
are
bit
my
about
3
them.
kids. Yeah. Yeah, they are awesome. They're all out doing their thing. Garrett is an archaeologist working for the federal government in the state of Washington, and doing
Wow.
cultural preservation. I can't tell you exactly what that is. Forest preservation is part of it. And my middle, Kellen, is in Kansas City. She works for an organization that does museum displays, and she does
Wow.
all the content writing for them. And
Okay.
then my youngest is a senior at Purdue in biological engineering.
How about that?
So they're awesome. They're doing great.
So these kids
They're,
are accomplished in their own rights, it sounds like.
they're
We got it.
doing well with the journey
Yeah.
that we've all been down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm so happy to say they're doing awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's a big step in the right direction, and we'll get into that a little bit from. But you went to Ball State University or college and have a master's from Loyola, and so you've been accomplished in your own right. Spent 30 years in recruiting as in nonprofits. So
Yeah.
that's something I'm assuming has helped you along the way in developing the Chris Center as well too.
It did. I mean, and we'll get into the story of how I got here, but there's. I think everybody has situations in their life that kind of take them to a certain journey, and my journey took a big turn,
Yeah.
a big twist, and I have to say, I didn't set out to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't part of my plan. I should be on the golf course right now, but this is the way it went, and I'm grateful for it. It was
Yeah.
a great journey.
So tell me a little bit about your journey. I know it's kind of a full journey, and not all positive, obviously. We've
Yeah.
noticed that these types of things prompt us to do different things. But tell us about your journey, and then jump right in and let's talk about the namesake of your center, your brother Chris. I knew Chris a little bit, but very accomplished man and did a lot of great things. And he was well loved by everybody that ran into him. So tell me a little bit about Chris and
Yeah.
then attach that to the journey
Okay.
that you've come through.
He was a big athlete as well. Played basketball in college and played sports in high school, and but well loved. He was a happy human being, very giving, a ton of empathy, a lot of fun. All my brother and my sisters will all say he was also our best friend. He was just a really good guy. And I'm going to use a quote from one of my favorite movies, Brian's Song. And if you recall that was filmed not too far from where we grew up,
Sure.
Terry. But it's when we
Yeah.
remember him, I hope they remember not how he died, but yet how he lived. I think it's something like that. And that's what I really like to talk about, is really how he lived. But he had a big influence on why I went this direction. It was a series of events, and I kind of want to start on how how those events kind of changed. But again, my kids were all teenagers, and I don't like picking on my kids, but this is a very common issue among teenagers, and not only my kids. And I mean, these are also with all teenagers across the United States are struggling with their mental wellness. But raising them, and my son had some struggles his senior year, and we found that he could not get the help he needed. And I thought of it, this was 2016. I thought, okay, something else has to be out there. And I knew how I grew up, and he was active in sports and he was busy, but it was, I think, I'd like to talk more about social media in a little bit as well, but it's tough being a teenager today compared to when we grew up. And it was tough too.
Absolutely.
But we couldn't get him the help we needed. And so I kept thinking there's got to be something else. And I would talk to people. And then I had 3 major life events that kind of changed the direction where I was going. And it started with a pet, a dog, a little Yorkie she was 18 and blind and deaf. And was running into walls. Anyway, accidentally left a gate open, and she got out, and I found her the next morning in the pond behind our house. And as those that were dog lovers, that was traumatic. And I pulled her out of the pond, and I felt like my world was spinning down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't much longer after that Chris passed away. And again, that was traumatic for our family. Anybody that has buried a son or lost a sibling, it was a really tough time for us. And then just a couple months later, my husband sat me down and said he wasn't happy and wanted a divorce.
Oh boy.
And I'm going, what the heck's going on here, right?
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of grief and loss was going on in a few short months. And so at the same time, my daughter was going through struggles as well. My son's off to college. My youngest was struggling as well, and it took us almost a year to get her diagnosed, and then it took almost just as long to get her the treatment that she needed.
Yeah.
And so, just a few days after my husband left, the treatment started for my daughter. We went in and had the workup, and they said, "Great, come back in 2 weeks." And I went out to the lobby to make another appointment, and I couldn't get her in for another 3 months.
Oh boy.
And this was prior to COVID, Terry. And so I thought, what the heck is going on with our mental health industry that we can't get these kids the help they need? And so I started talking, and I was at crisis level at that point. And I often say, when you're on the ground, the least you can do is get up on your knees. And I at crisis level with my family, and couldn't get her the help she needed in a timely way. And I said, okay, this is it. And 2 things happened then right after that really made me decide it's time to do something. And one was meeting Sandy Marrera, and I think you might have met Sandy. Sandy,
I had a nice conversation with her yesterday.
We're on the school board. She's great. We're on the school board at University High School, and we sat down to talk about the board. And then I got talking about what I wanted to do. She's a Duke-trained pediatrician working in emergent care at St. V's about 4 years ago. And she has seen teenagers come through the emergency room one after the other, and she felt like she was sticking a Band-Aid on them and sending them out the door. And so we sat down and talked about it. We both felt this passion for it. It's like we had chills, and she said, I want to help you. So she quit her day job.
Amazing.
And again, she's the professional. I'm not, Terry. I'm a mom with a need. I saw a need that was there, and I wanted to help my kids. And so she joined me. And then it was about a couple weeks later, I was in church, and I don't know if you've heard of, I'm sure you have, Kenny Moore.
Sure.
He's he's not a running back, but he plays for the Colts. And there's a story. And if your listeners want to look it up, have them Google Kenny Moore and Max Dixon. And Max was a teenager in London that was struggling, and he adopted the dog. And make the story short, he was downtown Indianapolis, and the dog got hit by a car, and it would have devastated him, except Kenny Moore was driving by at the time.
Wow.
And saw the youngster, picked him up, got him to the vet, and the dog was saved.
Wow.
Anyway, his dad picked up the story, Drew Dixon, and did a little article about it, and it went viral. And how the connection between an animal and an individual is so powerful, and what it can do for mental wellness. And I was sitting in church, and the pastor was telling the story. Go ahead, Terry.
No, I don't want to cut you off, but just reverse course a little bit back to when, I don't know how long those 3 things that happened in your life, how long that took. It sounded like they were
about
consecutive. I mean, that's bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that for your own mental health? I mean, I went through something similar to that, at least one of those things.
Family.
I was curious.
Yeah, absolutely, family. And then I was on my own. My husband moved away, and I was there to get my family put back together. And so it was hard, and probably the hardest thing, again, trying to also lift up my parents who had lost a son and my siblings, and going through both of those concurrently was definitely. I think I was on autopilot. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't.
And so it was this inception of the Chris Center that really drove me.
Yeah.
And kept me going.
So after the 3 months, you got off the floor onto your knees. You met Sandy. I had a nice conversation with her yesterday. It was like 12 minutes long. She goes, I got 12 minutes. So we took the whole 12 minutes. And, I asked her about you. I asked her about her, the Chris Center. And the thing that stuck out to me, one of the things that she said, Nancy is taking her pain and turned it into a passion. And both of those things equal a purpose. She's a dreamer, a visionary, and an optimist. You think that those are fair descriptions of you? Because those are pretty powerful descriptions.
Sandy's so kind. Optimist or naive? I'm not really sure which one. Where I didn't have the fear. I felt like sometimes when you're backed into a corner,
Yeah,
and again, I was fighting so fiercely for my kids at that point,
sure.
and there wasn't a solution. And so backed into a corner, I kept thinking, "There's got to be something else." So I'll call it naive, but optimistic. Sure, that I felt that especially how we grew up, Terry. I really felt that getting kids back into
Yeah.
nature. I mean, they're on these all the time, and I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just different, and so I felt like we needed to do something different to get kids back into nature and to get them to understand their own mental wellness and what to do
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean, talk a little bit if you would, because I'm of the same place as you are. I think when it comes to social media, social media has
Mhm.
kind of thrusted itself onto the society 10, 15 years ago or whatever it was. And to me,
Yeah.
it's a tool. Yeah, it's a tool, but it's can be an addiction, and it can be something that really drives kids into a mental state that they don't have the tools to understand it. They don't have the tools to know how to combat it.
Yeah.
And, there's nobody out there teaching like, hey, this is what can do to you. So give me your thoughts on social media. You said earlier that you had some thoughts there.
Yeah, I call them digital natives, or they've been called. They've known nothing but electronics since they were
Sure.
born. This is this age now that's all they've ever known. And so I'm thinking we can't take it away from them. It's there. How do we balance it? But the statistics are staggering with the inception of Instagram and
Yeah.
Snapchat and and depression run concurrently. And again, I'm not a professional, Terry.
Sure.
I just read
Yeah.
and I just find out what the information is. And the CDC has all kinds of statistics out there, and it's startling to me. How do we? And then as a parent, I struggle with
Yeah.
that to say, have you exercised, eaten well, sleep? Do you give back? All these things that you and I know are good
Sure.
for us, but how do you get a teenager to understand that when they're in the midst of all
Yeah.
that? And so part of our purpose was to educate parents so that they know as well. But I think we're going to see more kids at the crisis level if we can't figure out how to balance the social media with
Yeah.
everyday living with teenagers.
Yeah. And I mean, and you throw COVID on top of that, those
Throw COVID on
2
top of it.
years of, nothing but social media,
Yeah,
and you got
yeah,
kids that are 10, 11 going into COVID. They're all of a sudden they're 12 or 13. Those formative years at
yeah,
12 and 13, 11, 12, 13 are the years that they spent in their phone, on their
yeah.
computer, every day, all day, and you
Mhm.
can't help but think that there's going to be some
Mhm.
ramifications coming down the road for that.
Absolutely. And I'll be sitting in a restaurant and there's a little family there and the baby has an iPad in front of
Oh,
them.
yeah,
I don't know what long-term effects is that going to be. I'm not a professional, but I
sure.
have got to think it's not a good way. How can we balance it is more of what we're saying.
Yeah,
And I like to model because I'm sure you've done this with your kids. You tell them this is what you should do. And then they're going to roll in their eyes and looking at you like you have three heads.
yeah,
And so I think modeling for parents, we're big hikers. We love to hike. And
great.
so ever since they're itty bitty with Turkey Run, do you remember
Oh,
Turkey
yeah,
Run? A place we used to like to go
yeah, for
to.
sure.
And so if you start young of, of all these different
Hmm.
habits, automatic habits, atomic habits. I love that book too.
Yeah,
Um, and then they'll see it, and at some point they'll pick it up and realize, hey, this is good for me. If you can't get them to understand it themselves.
yeah. So tell me when you started the Chris Center as a result of the tragedies in your life. We'll call them tragedies; they really are.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
one tragedy doesn't just affect you; it doesn't affect the person it happens to. It affects a large swath of
Right.
people around you. I mean, when I'm doing research for this conversation, of course, I'm going onto your Facebook and Chris's Facebook, and I'm looking at and it affected hundreds of people across the board. And so I I think it's amazing because I'm not sure I could do it. I had another lady that lost a 19-year-old daughter at college, and she was on and she started a foundation. So it's similar to that. I have a hard time believing I could do what you did, coming from flat on your face to your knees to something that's really turned into be a helpful center, a helpful program. Tell me about starting that. Tell me about like how you actually said, okay, we're going to start this today. What that look like, and where were you mentally at that point when you said, okay, I've got to heal. This is part of my healing. Maybe not. Tell me about that individual decision.
Yeah. Yeah, so it was almost like autopilot. After I realized, okay, something else has to be done, I just started talking. And I called anybody and everybody that I knew that had some sort of background in mental health and nonprofit, animal therapy, anybody that I could get a hold
Right.
of. And I just got out there and started talking. And I knew we needed a little bit of money to get going. Sandy and I did not take a salary for the first couple of years. We just needed to get it going. And how did that happen?
Yeah.
I've got quite a few wonderful donors from South Newton, from Kentland, that have supported us. But that was, that was my job, getting out there and getting it relevant, is what I say. I had to put the four legs under the table, and so it had to be relevant first. I formed the 501c3. I joined other organizations that were similar to ours, and we partnered with several different organizations. And I just wouldn't shut up about it. I couldn't help myself that something else had to be done. And again, it took off. It just really took off.
I was shocked. I mean,
more than I
for
thought
those
it would.
of you that are watching that think Chris Center's been around for 15 years, it hasn't. They started in 2021, if I'm correct. Right in the midst of COVID. This type of thing, this type of tragedy in people's lives, and becomes this call to action. And Nancy's had this call to action. And if you go to the website, and I've been at the website, it is, it's amazing how many qualified people and volunteers have stepped up to participate in all these programs. So, bravo, but there's a long way to go. Tell me about the Chris Center a little bit, what the Chris Center does, the programs that you have right when you started. What was the goal going in?
Yeah. Well, our mission is to assist teens with their mental wellness by getting them back out to nature, and that power of the human-animal connection was really important to us. I mean, again, going back to the loss of my dog, and we all know what dogs do for us. So we're very fortunate right off the bat to partner with a farm that had alpacas. I didn't know much about alpacas, but a friend of ours, both Sandy and ours, had them, and she said, I want to do something with them. I want to help. She's both her and her husband are physicians.
Okay.
And they live in a little niche in Zionsville. They have just a tiny little hobby farm.
How about
and we
that?
said, okay, let's do something. Now, I started with this vision, Terry, before Sandy got involved, of a care farm. And I don't know if you've ever heard anything about care farms.
Yeah.
If you Google it, they'll be big in Europe. They're all over
Okay.
Europe. There's very few of them here. I think there's one in Pennsylvania, actually. But the premise is to kind of get people back to the earth and around animals, and doing farm work that helps with mental wellness.
Sure.
And so that was kind of my vision. That takes a lot of money to build a barn.
Yeah.
And so we kind of shifted a little bit, and we partnered with the alpacas.
Oops.
And got it?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. My camera quit running, but go ahead.
I love technology when it works. So we looked for a program that helped teens with mental wellness using alpacas, and we couldn't find it anywhere. And so we developed it ourselves. We had some professionals come in and help us develop the program. And we bring kids out to the farm, like the Girl Scouts, organizations Bring Change to Mind, individuals. We have camps, and we teach them about mindfulness, how to be aware of your mental wellness, your surroundings, the nature, what that does. And, those animals are so cool. They are so, and they don't spit as people think. They really are very neat.
I don't know. I don't think the alpaca. What is there is an animal that spits. I'm not sure which one it is, but
it's
the llama.
The llama.
Yes, that's right. The llama.
They're a little bigger.
So
they will if they're cornered.
Yeah,
but
they seem like sweet animals. I guess we have an alpaca farm down the street, not too far from here. And they look like little gentle, giraffes, only 6 feet tall or whatever.
They're almost like dogs.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
fabulous.
So you have a lot of. Go ahead.
And then
Sorry.
we
Go ahead.
grew from. I said,
Go
then
ahead.
we grew from there, and we realized how can we. My goal was more in the moment, because when my kids were struggling, it was finals week and they're stressed out. I said, all right, let's go to PetSmart and put our hands in the cage of
Yeah.
the cats,
Wow.
and you could
How
just
about
see their
that?
stress coming down. I thought, how can we do something in the moment? So we developed the dog therapy team.
Yeah.
And maybe Sandy knows a number. We had 19, maybe 20 handlers, and we've partnered with several schools around the city. And we come in for whatever their needs are, finals week,
Yeah.
individual clubs and organizations,
Mhm.
and help them bring their stress down.
How about that? Yeah, I noticed you had
So
a
that
lot
was the
of.
nature part.
Yeah. And I didn't know the connection. I didn't know how you got to, okay, mental health is an issue, the animal thing. And now I understand the story a little bit more about your dog and what that meant. And I tend to agree. I'm not a huge animal guy. I've always had dogs. I've always had animals, but
Mhm.
there's there's an animal lover, and then there's a pet owner. And I think the animal lovers have a different sense about
Yeah.
animals. And I think they're your
Yeah.
best friend. And I think, you come home from the hard day at work, they meet you at the door, they don't care about your day, they're just glad to see you. And I think that certainly means something, and says a lot about what you're doing for kids. How did you go from the
Yeah.
start? In other words, okay, we're going to do this, we've got something in place, we're going to do the alpaca farm. How did the word get out? I mean, you've been in business, let's call it business, 3 years, and
Right.
you've helped hundreds and hundreds of kids. How did that
Yeah.
catch fire for you?
It really just started with picking up the phone and calling people. And I think, again, how we grew up, community is so
Yeah.
important, and that this is what part of the mission of the Chris Center as well, is to create a
Hmm.
community, because I think people are, when they are connected,
Sure.
they have that value and feel less
Yeah.
hopeless. And so I started making calls with all my networks here in Carmel, anybody that I knew, and anybody that had the expertise that we needed, and I could get them on board, which was really
Right.
pretty easy. Kind of started it out, but it took off. The Chamber of Commerce, our banker is a South Newton graduate, Bonnie Riley. I could just go on of all the
Mm.
people that connection, reaching out there, the value it
So
brings.
how did the kids start to hear about this? Now I know you've done work with
Okay,
the high schools, some high schools and some other
yeah,
schools. Was that the focus for
yeah.
you when you first started? Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pitch it to schools. How did you attract the children that that had the issues that they
Yeah.
were dealing with?
Here's what we found. We did a little case study before we all started this, and it was very small and not very
Mhm.
scientific. But we had them come in and sit with some dogs. And another organization came in for us, and we had them do a
Okay.
survey about, would you come to something like this? Would you come out to the farm? What do you think about
Hmm.
having animals? And what we found overwhelmingly is kids would say, I love this, but I want to
Mm.
volunteer. In other words, they didn't want to be part
Mm.
of an organization like that, but they wanted to volunteer. So what we found is the stigma was still too strong,
Interesting.
for kids to admit to their mental wellness.
Yeah.
I'm friends with the former football coach at Westville High School. He was
Okay.
their mental health guru, and he said, Nancy, we would open up a room at the school, and if kids were having a day, they could come and sit in the beanbag and maybe listen to some music. And he said they never came,
Mm.
because other kids knew if they were walking into the room that they were struggling with
Yeah.
their mental wellness. And so it's still a stigma. So what we did, we partnered with counselors in the schools, and there's a program in Hamilton County called the Youth Assistance Program. And we made a partnership with them, and they would find the kids for us that they thought could really have some
Right.
fun, and a day out. And then we created the camps, and that's what went from there. It started small, and then it's gotten bigger every year. And so the other organization, and we kept it as, again, this isn't about depression and anxiety. This is about mental wellness and joy and happy, and how to find your peace. And that's made a difference in our approach to finding the kids that we think, because we think all teens
Everyone.
need a break from
Yeah, for sure.
the treadmill we have them on.
Yeah, and that was one of the things on your website that I read
Absolutely.
is not about, this is not about kids struggling with depression. This is about kids making strides towards mental health or mental wellness. And I thought that was different.
Exactly.
I'm not depressed.
And understanding it.
Yeah,
Right.
I just need to disconnect from this part of my life, go out here and, like you said, get into nature, pet some animals, really just kind of feel that connection to the earth, if you will. And I think there's something to be said for that. I mean, we grew up, like you said, in a little town, farming community, cornfields, and, going out in the woods and ramming around at the river or the creek or the whatever. And that's a favorite part of my childhood, was Kentland, Indiana. And so, and for all of you out there, I don't know how many people, and I did, you remember Tracy Smith, I had him on, he was my first guest. I think he said there was like 2,800 people in Kentland. So if you turn your lights off at night going by it, you'd miss it. So, but it was this, ramming around outside, going up and down the streets on bicycles, fishing, going around. And it was just, to me, I look back at that, and that was when I was probably mentally the best I ever was. So I connected what you said on your website with your vision. And your vision, I wrote it down. Our vision is for teens and preteens in the greater Indianapolis to be empowered to manage their mental wellness. And I think that's a great vision. You're empowering kids individually to say, I can take some control over this. I don't need to be depressed. I can do things to mitigate that.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. We just, we're just a small piece of the pie of the puzzle, really. And there's so many different, we absolutely believe in the professional industry of mental health, medication, whatever kids need, whatever teens need, whatever people need. But we feel that there's other things that they can do to kind of be aware of it. We could go down to 6-year-olds and start talking about this. But definitely the studies show right around junior high is when it really picks up. But being aware of it and understanding, okay, I don't feel good today. I'm going to put my phone down and I'm going to go for a walk. What are some of the things that they can do to help with their mental wellness?
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess that kind of leads me into my question about you individually, and then your extended family, meaning your siblings, mom and dad. I found that the conversations I've had, everybody deals with grief differently. You can't tell somebody that they're wrong. How do they, I'm dealing with this grief this way. You can't tell them that they're wrong to deal with it that way. But your family, how did they, did they jump into the idea of the Chris Center? Did they use that as something that they, for healing and for, hey, we're going to do something good and Nancy's leading? And, was that something that you did collectively?
Actually, no, they've all gotten out of the way. They've let me, again, they're very proud and they support it.
Of course.
My kids, and again, I've kind of thrown them under the bus because they've been my biggest guinea pigs, been my biggest cheerleaders as well. Sure. And again, they're doing amazing. They're all past that.
Yeah.
Because like I said, there's so many kids that deal with it, but they're doing amazing, but all very supportive. But yeah, grief is, it comes and goes. There's mornings I wake up and say, I think I'll give Chris a call, and then it'll, hit me that he's gone, because it was unexpected. We weren't expecting him to pass away. And so, grief, it can be used. And as you've talked to the previous guest, and I listened to some of your podcasts,
good.
Grief can be used as that accelerator. To motivate you to do something that you're thinking about or that you've been thinking about, that you just need a little push to get it going.
Yeah, I think that's tremendous. Like you said, the last guest I had, she's like, I had no idea what I was doing. I just jumped in and knew something had to be done, called a bunch of people I knew, And it just rang true when I started reading about your story and how it unfolded. I was like, there's a little line that goes through each story that's similar. And, it's of course tragedy
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with grief and the steps of grief. And some people get off the floor and some people don't. And the ones that get up and do something dramatic and in the face of that is great. And that doesn't say that you're any better than any of the people that deal with grief differently. But, that's the stories we're trying to bring, is like,
Right.
you can do something with your grief,
Yeah.
and there's people around you that will support.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope that every family that's got something going on like that has something. But so family's very supportive, and you've been open for 3 years. Anybody in your family besides you involved at all, or no? Like on the day-to-day,
No,
or volunteer
no,
or anything?
just me. I mean, again, financially, they've supported by all means, and but
Yeah,
I'd like to get a dog and get involved
of
myself,
course.
but I'm too busy at some point. But because I
Now,
did
I read
retire
that I did read
January
on.
1st, Terry. Did I tell you that?
I just saw that. I was going to say, I just read that you just retired, and kind of leads me into a couple different questions. What's next for the Chris Center? Obviously, Sandy and I'm sure you're
Yeah.
still involved that way, but what's next for the Chris Center? I was a little shocked that it was only Indianapolis now. I mean, it's a big place. Do you have plans to expand? Do you have plans to, what's the plan?
Oh boy. Yeah, since we're kind of inventing what do they say? You're driving the bus or you're building the bus. I don't know how as it's
Yeah.
moving, or you're on the train as it's going, and
Yeah.
I get kind of mixed up.
No, but I get it.
We
Yeah.
really are recreating the wheel. Really have recreated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did retire. I'm 64. I was tired, Terry. I worked 80-hour weeks for the
Yeah.
last 5 years, and I really didn't deal with my own healing because I was so immersed in that. So I needed to step back.
Interesting.
This brain just doesn't work like it used to. And so Sandy is amazing. She really is. And she's just taking this to the next level. So we have partnered with a professor at Purdue. I don't know if she told you about this one as well, because we found when the dogs went to the schools, and especially into the junior high schools, they're not trained professionals, they're dog lovers. So they have their dog, the dog is certified, we register it.
Sure.
And then the handler is, it could be anybody. And so as they sit there and they pick up on things from kids that could, be a red flag of some sort, how do we train them? How do we get them placed really to be very good listeners? So the Dr. Neeforth, I don't want to mess it up, I believe it's Neeforth at Purdue, is going to develop some training for us for our dog handlers. We couldn't find it anywhere else that deals with teenagers in this way.
Yeah.
And so we're moving ahead with that one, trying to grow the dog programs. I think we're in 6 schools right now, 6 or 7.
Okay.
And we want to expand that. We can do that without volunteers, though. And so growing in that way. We also have a parent education series. And just taking bits and pieces that we feel the need is there. And because you don't want to grow so big that you don't have the means to support it. And I learned that about a nonprofit pretty quick, is that you just want to take a little at a time and make the biggest impact that you can with what you have.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about, because that was one of the programs or one of the things that you offered in the Chris Center was the parent training. And so often, even in my case, when you have a teen that's struggling in whatever way they're struggling, it is a teen or a son or a daughter. It doesn't have to be a teen, but when they're struggling, it's difficult for a parent to reach inside their head and know how to help. Tell me about that training that you give to parents and how that works out.
Really, it's just an educational series. And so we partner with the Carmel Library and University High School, and when we bring experts in the field
Okay.
and come and talk to the parents. It's open, it's free. Some of the talks were social media and what it does to the brain, how to talk to your teen in a positive way. A lot of these educational programs that parents need to to learn. We all need to learn how to parent. There's no guidebook for it half the time, but
Yeah.
and so that's where that started. It ran through the winter. It just finished up the last one, but
Gotcha.
that was part of my goals. Not only involved the nature in it for the kids, but how do you support the parents? Because there was I, and again, I had a lot of friends whose kids were going through the same thing,
Sure.
and I couldn't get the help I needed. And I thought, okay, how do we support the parents as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
And bring education to them.
Yeah. That's something. Now, is that like a 3-week series or a 6-week series, or what exactly is it?
It ran over the winter. I think we start in about December, and it finishes off. I think the last one was a couple weeks ago. So we try to run
Oh,
about
okay.
a couple a month, depending on
Okay.
in the library. Yeah,
Fantastic.
and
Fantastic.
and growing.
Well, that's awesome. I tell you, I saw when, of course, during COVID, I wasn't working for a period of time, a few weeks, probably 3 or 4 months, because we were shut down as realtors here in PA.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I kind of tripped into your Chris Center, and I thought, wow, what an interesting thing. And then I saw it grow, and then when I started the podcast, I was like, oh, this is a story that I'd like to tell. And there's so many layers to it. There's, obviously Chris, and then the layers of your own struggles and the people around you. And, I just think it's a wonderful story, and I want to thank you for telling it. I feel like
Thanks,
if my
Jerry.
podcast hits one person that needs to hear it, that it's worth doing this. And that's why you're in the business. I mean, you want to help kids,
Thank
you want to
you.
help people. Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm humbled. The greatness part, let's take that out, because I'm just there's nothing special about me. There's just a situation that happens and you see the need and you feel so inclined to do something again. And the secret of the sauce was putting the people around me that really, and I kept saying, they are dropping out of the sky. People that have amazing backgrounds that were willing
Yeah.
to jump on board with this. And I was so blessed and grateful for that it happened that way.
Well, that's amazing. I got 2 more questions for
how it
you.
went.
2 more questions. One, are you a reader, and
Okay.
what kind of books are you reading? And 2, if you had, and this is not on the sheet that I say, I've since added this. If you had 5 minutes, if you had the attention of the world for 5 minutes, what would you tell the world? What advice would you give?
I am a reader, but the most I've read lately is about mental health. And so I'm anxious now to get back to some really fun books and read something, get back to reading again. I love golf too, so I'm going to get out and hit the links a little more. But honestly, what I would tell the world is go for a hike. And I want to come back to my son who really started it. And he is, again, my hero, because he self-identified. He realized that what was going on here was not healthy. And so he is a hiker. He lives in the remote part of Republic, Washington, up by the Canadian line
awesome.
In a cabin with mice.
Amazing.
And he gets out and hikes, and he knows it makes him feel better. And all 3 of my kids have found their joy in their life, and I think that's what I said. Get out. If you're not feeling good, go for a walk, go for a hike, something to move your body. I don't know. That's such a small thing, but that's what I would say.
No, I think it's great. And I appreciate you being on here. So thank you for tuning in to Grind to Growth to Greatness. We find greatness in so many different places. Nancy is a very humble lady, and we're thankful for that. That's why she's so good at what she does, and we're thankful for what she's done with the Chris Center. But this is certainly a great story we've enjoyed telling. Sorry about the camera that went off, but we want you to tune in every week to find our next story, Grind to Growth to Greatness. So welcome to season 2. Nancy Elbert, thanks for coming Appreciate you.
You've been listening to the Grind to Growth to Greatness podcast. Our passion is to talk to the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, creators, athletes, anyone who's made it, and dive into their struggles, their successes, and their secrets. We hope you've enjoyed the show. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Grind to Growth to Greatness. See you next time.